Welcome to Experiencing Consciousness. My name is Dyba.
And I'm Dr. Kathryn Rossi. We're happy you're here.
I was thinking that today we can talk about the differences between a few terms: direct, non-direct, and indirect. And I know that you said that you once told me that it would be good to talk about the differences between the direct and non-direct distinction. But I remember an anecdote, actually a story that Dr. Ernest Rossi told me once. And we were sitting in his office, and just, I was asking him some things about the indirectiveness of some interventions, and just, when we were talking about this topic, he said he told me a story, like when he was already working with Dr. Erickson, with Milton H. Erickson, and one day he had that kind of insight that came to him, and he said, suddenly it came to me that I understand Erickson's work. And so I ran to him, and very enthusiastically I told him, Dr. Erickson, or Milton, I don't know how he referred to him in this anecdote, but let's say that he said, Dr. Erickson, suddenly now I understand the deeper meaning of your work. You are non-direct, like Carl Rogers, something like that. You are non-direct and Carl Rogers is non-direct. Now I understand that. And he said to me, and Erickson looked at me with this, focused voice, with this focused gaze, took a deep breath and said, okay, now Carl Rogers says that he is non-direct, and he is non-direct. And I say, I am indirect. And I am very direct in my indirect fashion.
I remember that too.
Yeah, that's why so if you want, you can, develop on that or correct that, but that's why I wanted to introduce these three terms like together.
Well, it's really fascinating the ways in which you can approach psychotherapy. And of course, Erickson was known for his work with hypnosis. And most of the time, my understanding is that that's what he did. He did hypnosis. Mm-hmm. He found it really valuable. And so he worked in this particular way. The way that he learned to be indirect was by writing personal scripts for a particular client for a particular session that he used only once. But he would write out, maybe it was a 10-page script, and he would then work it down to be 6 pages, then 4 pages, then 2 pages, so that he could embed within what he was saying all of the nuances that he wanted. And it's really interesting. And he did that for, not with everybody, but he did that, I think, for a number of years. It's a question I should ask his daughter, Roxana, and see if she remembers. But that was the way that he taught himself to go for what these nuances are. And in choosing words that were the right words to say. And he would choose the words to say based on the words that he heard from that particular client. And so he was always an individual-centered kind of therapist. So he didn't have any protocols or routines or practices that he would apply across the board. It was always in response to that particular person. And even if he would have written out a script, if that script didn't seem to be appropriate in the moment, he wouldn't use it. So it's this is my way of saying that it's really easy to be direct. Direct, for instance, is when I say, Jan, close your eyes. That's right. Please close your eyes right now. And of course, your eyes are wanting to close, and they can close. And I can say to you, and we're going on a journey now. We're going to walk in the forest. We're walking in the forest right now. And we're walking around this big oak tree. Let's make that a Palo Verde tree in Erickson's courtyard of his home, outside his office. And as we walk around this Palo Verde tree, slowly and carefully, you go deeper and deeper and deeper into trance. So by the time we make one circle around the Palo Verde tree, you're surprised at how you see your grandmother. Now, what is she doing there? She's there to give you a word or two that you want to hear from her. And as you receive this communication, this love, this respect from her, something special can happen in you. That specialness, that deep appreciation for who you are and where you've come from. Yes. And your grandmother, she's finished now. She walks away, and you find that you walk around the Palo Verde tree, this time in the opposite direction. And slowly, as you walk around the Palo Verde tree, you come more and more and more into focus of today. That's right. And when I count to 3, you'll come out of trance and be here with me. 3, 2. That's right. Almost ready. Fully awake. And that's right. 1.
There I am.
Yes, it's beautiful, isn't it? That was very direct.
Yeah, that's true. But let me reflect on that for a moment. I just want to share a few things from the perspective of a structural analysis of the thing, because obviously, as in my case, observer operator emerged and started to analyze that at the same time being in the process. That was actually funny. I decided, when you said at the beginning, close your eyes and stuff, and I go, well, yeah, direct approach you're using. I will not go for it, and I'll so my first reaction was actually healthy resistance, was like, okay, I
Yes.
challenge that. And then what happened actually, and that's actually in line with the associational approach described in hypnotherapy, exploratory casebook, and hypnotic realities. Because then you started talking about the Palo Verde tree. First there was the forest, and then so I said to myself, I love forest, but so suddenly I'm in the forest somewhere near my house, but I'm thinking to myself, obviously on the other end, what if I don't like forest? That would be a trap, huh? And then you started talking about the Palo Verde tree, and I actually have very positive association with that particular tree in Erickson's garden. I was actually one of those people who were able to take a picture for the last time before it actually was, as far as I remember, wind to tear it down or something like that. So, but we had with my friends, we had a great day that time where we went there, and being there was also incredibly cool. So it was incredible day, incredible weather, incredible place, everything. So that actually launched, So, okay, that was direct what you said, but I think you had luck that I had the reference points, the reference experience that it actually, kind of evoked in me. So I would say that the suggestion was direct, but the work was on my part. My unconscious found, based on some inner search, associations that were able to actually create that experience for myself. So I saw myself down there, and with my friend Katarzyna, whom you might know a bit, since she's sometimes commenting on our podcasts, and probably you also know her from your visits to Poland. And some other friends that I met there. And then suddenly you talked about my grandma, and I'm like, what is she doing here? Like, okay, but since I love her and miss her, then I invite. And so that was the experience from my point of view,
Mhm.
And so on one side, on one level, I was able to experience that in a way, but on the other also analyze that, so that now I can share some reflections on the phenomenological experience of being in that direct sort of trance.
Yes, and you see, for many people, the direct method that, well, for most hypnotherapists work in a more direct fashion. This is why I brought it up, and I love that the first thing that came up in you was resistance. Now, this is something that I find is a possibility to a probability in using direct hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And because in the using the direct hypnosis, which I almost never do, but I wanted to demonstrate something today, that would be me telling you what to do.
Yeah, directly,
And
like an
yeah,
instruction.
directly telling you what to do. And so I was leading the entire time. The therapist, was leading the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So so you got jarred a couple of times because I started with the forest and then I decided, I'm going to make this more specific and move it to Arizona. And so I obviously did not pre-plan this, or I would have started in Arizona, right? And then with a very specific tree that I knew that you knew this tree. And I knew that you were thinking of Erickson, or you've been thinking about Erickson today. And then I wanted you to meet somebody that really loves you and to be able to see this person, your grandmother. I chose that for you. And then when I reversed you out of it, that was to demonstrate that almost all the time when you need somebody to complete trance, you can count backwards 1 to 10. I did it 1 to 3. Mm-hmm. So these are really common ways that people work. And so you know what? It worked for you today. But you had a lot of self-talk going on in the side of analyzing. I know what she's doing, and it's almost irritating when it works. It's like, I know what she's doing, and it's still working.
Yeah. Plus, we are friends, so and I. So I was caught in a conflict because on one side I wanted to resist, but on the other side I was like, I want to help you.
Well, that's the other element of in a direct style, is that in your case you were the client and you want to help me, the therapist, because I was leading. You didn't want me to fail. Right. So they're different styles. I don't want to say one style is better than another. That would be completely incorrect. And obviously this was a really short little thing. So would you like an example of indirect?
Well, sure. Let's do it.
Well, because I'll say a few words about indirect. So the difference is the polar opposite of direct. So in indirect, you follow, you don't lead. And so it's incumbent upon the therapist to be really sensitive to be able to follow. And that's where minimal cues comes in. Mm-hmm. And there's, generally speaking, in an indirect method, questions. So instead of making statements, it comes in the form of questions, which creates choice.
Yeah, I would develop that a bit more, because it sounds pretty cool, but then I'm thinking my first thought, double bind.
Well, sometimes you can do a double bind, specifically a double bind. That in some instances, that's like a cool thing to do. But just to understand the difference between indirect and direct is the first thing that we want our listeners to be able to respect, that and to be able to explore it in themselves. And so, here we are. What are we? We're about 12 or 15 minutes in to being together. That's about right? Yeah, that's about right. And so
I lost it because you hypnotized me. So my time distorted.
Well, you've got time distortion going in your favor, but we've been together about that long on this podcast. And so according to ultradian theory, it's kind of, ready to do some inner work, usually at about this time. And so I want to invite you to tune in to where you're most comfortable in your body right now, Jan.
I'll be difficult and I'll tell you that I am actually very energized.
Okay. You can be very energized. You can be in the high phase of hypnosis. Where are you most comfortable in your body?
Let me check that for you. To be honest, I'm pretty comfortable all the way. I'm just trying to look for the place where it's like, the most of it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Let me readjust so that I can, be even more comfortable.
That's right.
Where is it?
And you tune in there. I'm just going to say an aside right now to anyone who's listening or watching is without me saying a word, Jan closed his eyes. I didn't tell him to close his eyes.
I'll be difficult. I will open them. Sure.
And he's a wild one, so he can open them, he can close them. It's entirely up to him. But it's one of those minimal cues when people are going inside is they'll naturally close their eyes.
Yeah. So actually, that's difficult. I wanted to say that in my head, I feel most comfortable, but when I just thought about that, suddenly I feel pain in my in the area of my forehead.
Okay.
But
why don't you just go with that
let me change the position one more time.
Okay.
I'm experimenting now. Okay.
And it's good to experiment.
That would be better. Okay, so now. Okay, fair to say probably feet.
All right.
And hands. Feet and hands.
Okay. So really enjoy this comfort, this good feeling you have in your feet and in your hands. And allow that to continue as it wants to. I don't know if it wants to spread. I don't know if it wants to condense. But what I do know is you can experience that comfort deeply as a support to you. That's right, deeply. And by way of contrast, you can tune into anything that comes up for healing. And for those that can see, there's a fluttering of Jan's eyelids. And there was a difference in his respiration. And so I really don't know what's going on inside of him, but I know something's happening. And I do know that's right. Really chewing on that. Swallowing what you need to swallow. That I say in response to something that he was doing with his mouth. And he did just swallow a little bit. Because it takes courage That's right. Mm-hmm. It takes courage to go in deep to what's most important right now. Knowing there's parts of you that are very comfortable, even as we speak. And your inner observer can simply watch. Of what will come next. One of the things that's true with indirect work is it has a tendency to be much quieter. There's far fewer words. And I don't know if this brings you back to an earlier time. Mm-hmm. That's right. I responded to there was a little bit of a shake. And I can make a guess about that. Something's all shook up. Sometimes it's good to shake things up. And of course, I'm sensitive to how quiet I'm being. It's not always easy for therapists to be quiet and to simply allow their client to experience what they need to experience. Yes. Could that be a new view, Jan? He moved his head to one side. I'm responding to him. I'm following. Really receiving that, Jan. That's right. Sometimes it's shocking. I'm responding to the rapid eye flutter. And there was another little shake that went on. And later, he'll tell us what went on inside of him, if and only if it's right for him to share. Mm-hmm.
Well, I can share a few words, but to be honest, I don't know. Many things just come through my mind like rapidly. So
Wonderful, Jan. You let them rapidly come.
just accepting everything that as it comes and goes.
Yes, that's what you want to do. That came from Jan, to just simply accept what comes up. And it was very generous of him to say a word or two. And you can even ask your client, could you share a word or two to help me further? In this case, I don't need that. You see, I know Jan and his brilliant mind that moves so fast. You really do know a lot of things, Jan. And maybe the question becomes, What's the most important idea that comes to mind? Or is it a sensation? The way that my husband Ernie would describe this way of working is it's fail safe. It means the therapist doesn't risk failing, the client doesn't risk failing. You can see Jan's not here to please me. Oh, that's right. As he moves his head back and forth and comes to the center. And I can see there's some brightness that's coming to his cheeks, some kind of blood flow. Are your cheeks rosy when you're feeling good? I don't know. They can be rosy when you're raging mad too. I really don't know. But I do know that you can welcome whatever wants to come up for healing. That's right. That's right. So what I look for with minimal cues, particularly in this instance, I can see Jan from his upper chest up. And so that's where I'm looking. He's breathing a little bit more deeply now. Sometimes that can be a sigh of relief. We don't know yet. And I can look at his swallowing response, what's happening with his eyes, and the direction, this looking up. And little shakes, sometimes the surprise shakes that there can be. It's just curious. So, of course, Jan, I want you to be in this place as long as you need to. But you also know that this will continue. Mm-hmm. And so there was an exhale through his mouth and a relaxation of his lips. That's right. And even a little more settling with his eyes. Not as rapid, this eye movement. As we know in dreams, in REM sleep, eyes, they move like that. And you know, there's an integration going on in REM sleep. We can only wonder if Jan is having an integration now. But especially for people who are able to watch, you can see he's doing all the work. I'm following. Oh, he's shaking his head. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, what would it like to really be able to say no? What would that be like? I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's right. Mm-hmm. And can you really experience both sides of that? I say as he's moving his head from one side to the other. Yes, ever so slowly, it seems. Could it be a new direction? Yes, receiving that, Jan. And for those people that are watching me, you can see I'm constantly in motion in my chair. I'm very active and very calm at the same time. It's natural to move. And I asked Jan much earlier, where does he feel comfort in his body? And it was in his hands and his feet. And we may find out later if that comfort stayed. That's right. That's right, Jan. Ernie would call that psychological shocks and surprises to have a twitch like that. Mm-hmm. Yes, Jan. So being quiet right now, Jan, just for a moment or two where you're not giving back to us. Jan has opened up his eyes. I did not tell him to open up his eyes. He just did. And he just closed them quietly and slowly, because sometimes you need to go in for just a little bit more. And if you need to go in a little bit more, will those eyes close more or less all by themselves? Or will they stay open? That's right. His eyes closed again. That's right. This is what it means to follow and not lead. And for those watching, you could see his eyes when they were open, they were only half open. He was continuing in trance. So this is not a time to ask him a lot of questions. Sometimes when you go in again, you get something that you really need. That could be possible, Jan. That's right. That's right. It's good to go to both sides. Now, if I were to give a post-hypnotic suggestion, this is the time that I would do it. But I don't need to give any post-hypnotic suggestions today to Jan. He's doing just fine. And of course, I have no idea what he's been working on. That's entirely private on the inside of him. Mm-hmm. That's right. In this crazy world where everything is so fast, sometimes it's just plain nice to slow down, to receive what you need to receive. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so I notice your eyes are beginning to blink. And we can only wonder what they'll do next. Mm-hmm. That's right. Really receiving that. Mm-hmm. That deep breath. Today, we didn't talk about the 4 stages of the creative cycle. When you see a deep breath like that, the question is this a stage 3? I don't know. But in chronobiology, the science of time, we know typically person goes inside for the amount of time that they need. And they know when it's time that they've gotten what they need. And we know that.
Okay.
Two
I'm
things.
there.
Yeah, so be quiet for just another moment. I want you to be able to receive. Jan's eyes are fully open and he had a huge smile. So at this point, Jan, this is very important and you know me well, is that you are welcome to share anything, but only share what's going to help you further. And you can keep it entirely private if that's what you want to do.
Well, what to share?
If anything.
The first thing that I remember very clearly that you said was something about enjoying discomfort, and I understood that in 2 ways, which was enjoying this comfort and enjoying discomfort. So I was like looking at those places in my body where I felt comfortable, but at the same time just letting the discomfort happening and processing. And let me just switch the way.
And of course, I never said the word discomfort. That was something from the inside of Jan, which is fabulous.
Yeah, so that's what happened. And then, I was open to anything that was going on. And I was at first I was kind of analyzing things, and then I thought to myself, I mean, we're probably gonna do it either way at the beginning, or you probably gonna do it, and so I just let it go. And then when you said, like, a few moments in advance, you said that, what was that? The deep breath, that is actually a sign of entering, maybe a sign of entering stage 3 of the process. At this particular time, I was thinking that actually there's a lot of places in my body that I feel uncomfortable, like my backs, for example. And so when that came to my mind, I started to think about ways, about ways of actually actively doing something about it, probably that's.
I'm holding up my fingers to show stage 3.
So that's a solution, so I was thinking about solutions to a particular problem, and so that probably was stage 3, actually. Wonder how it's going to be with the verification stage,
Well, and the good point is that the verification, how you're going to put it into your life, that doesn't always come immediately, particularly that it's the night where you are, and soon you will go to sleep. You'll wake up and you may have a stage 4 idea of how you're going to put this into your life. You don't always have to know it right away.
Yeah, maybe I'll wait. But I've got some ideas. I mean, some ideas came out. We're gonna test them. I'll share next time.
Great. May I ask you a question?
Sure.
Did you find any resistance in this process?
Well, no. And again, if I were to be honest, I mean, generally I don't go into trance too easy with others, because most of the times I've got this analytical part of me that launches into the process and actually starts to look for mistakes and errors that people do. So to not do it, I need to really trust someone and just let it go. So my observation is that I could do that only with you at particular occasions when we were, doing that. And with Dr. Rossi, these are actually two people that were able any time in my life to put me into any sort of trance. And that didn't actually brought up any resistance, because there was a trust. And I never felt forced to do anything, so it was like always the spirit of more like discovering what's gonna happen. Then it was like, most of the times it was not I'm telling you to do something, it was more like I'm wondering what's gonna happen. I'm wondering if you could do this or that, and I wonder how or when you're gonna do it, and what will you experience while doing that. So it was like those kind of permissive questions that I'm trying to analyze now. But
well, you are, but it's true that being with someone that cares, and that is not going to force you to do anything. In fact, I'm like the opposite, where I say, now you keep this private for now. You only share a word or two. And that's because this continues in you. This continues, not discontinues. Just wanted to make sure there was no dis in there.
Some things may continue, some things may discontinue.
That's true. And of course, we spoke a little earlier about double binds. And if I were to say to continue or to discontinue, that would be a double bind. But that whoever one works with in a deep way, in a deep therapeutic way, absolutely, there needs to be this trust there.
Yeah.
And I came to this because I came to this particular way of working because I don't really like people to tell me what to do. And most people don't like to be told what to do. Occasionally, I'm clueless, tell me what to do. But most of the time, people want to figure it out for themselves. And so in
Have the
this
freedom.
particular way, I find that people move faster in their psychological healing with the indirect methods. But it has to be consistent with the personality of the therapist. And so, today I thought that it was going to be most important to really experience the differences between the two. And I want to reiterate, one is not better than the other. It's what you resonate with is important. But the more that we can expand our thinking and even methodologies, the better therapists we're going to be. I will bring up, because I think, Ernie was just amazing and fearless. And so it was, 22 years ago when he wrote the psychobiology of mind-body healing. And it was actually in this very room that I'm sitting in. And he asked me to transcribe a very famous demonstration case of a woman with rheumatoid arthritis. And he analyzed what he did as a therapist in that case. And when he was, he'd look at something and say, oh, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done it like that. I should have done it a different way. And the case turned out brilliantly. I mean, she really got what she needed. It was one of those miracle cases that her hands were just so distorted and red and swollen, her fingers. And in the end, that most of the swelling was gone and she had freedom to move her hands. I mean, it was really that there's no one that would say that was not a successful session. But he acknowledged, in writing, well, that was not the correct direction to take. And, in little instances. And so I bring that up because you don't always have to be 100% right. You're experimenting too. So sometimes, you think you're being indirect and you realize, well, I was pretty direct there. It's like, that's okay. It's a process that you learn over time. How are you feeling now, Jan?
I would like really to say something, but I'm like, I'm listening and I'm very good at listening now, but not too good at answering questions. I mean,
exactly.
I would the question I would ask, what about being non-direct? But then I'm thinking to myself that maybe we will address that matter on another podcast. And
we will. And like I say, the vast majority of the time I work in indirect ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the vast majority of the times it suits me. The vast majority of time that Ernie worked was in indirect ways. And Erickson, he had a combination of the two.
Yeah.
And so with some people, he worked very, very directly. And other people, he worked indirectly. And that's why he's worth studying. Because it's like, when do I work indirectly? When do I work, directly? Non-directly that's a whole other thing. But I think that maybe today we've satisfied some questions, and maybe we've also have a lot more questions come up. And
that's true. So I'll say because this is another conversation. I think that we have like 2 or 3 more conversations ahead of us about that distinction and about ways of being direct, indirect, non-direct, and I would also, if I were to define myself, I would also say that I'm mixing the direct and indirect together. Mm-hmm. And sometimes what I like doing is also being directly indirect and indirectly direct. So that's also interesting kind of distinction, and mixing those 2 levels together. So maybe we can develop on that also, but that would be maybe in another
we always, it's like it continues.
Exactly. That would be another episode of our
right. And so for those watching, shoot us your questions, this sort of thing, and we'll always do our best to answer them. And I just wish everybody a numinous time of discovering yourself, and a numinous time of discovering who you are as a therapist.
Well, that's actually worth exploring all the time. Mm-hmm. So thank you all very much. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on www.kathrynrossi.com. Is it correct?
That's correct. Yeah, yes. I've got to start writing newsletters. Otherwise, people are going to be disappointed. I'll get to it.
Yeah, we're going to get to all those things. And don't forget to also like the Facebook page of Dr. Kathryn Rossi.
Oh, thank you. That's generous of you. Yes.
This was another episode of our Experiencing Consciousness podcast. Thank you for being with us. Exactly. We're all in
Thank you, Jan. You're the best. Be well, be happy, celebrate life.